going to move this here maybe.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our weekly discussion series that's hosted by the Chaldean Cultural Center in collaboration with U of M Detroit Center, Unique Voices in Films, and CMN TV. I'm your host, I'm Neymoun, and our guest today is Dr. Zahra Ali. Welcome, Zahra. Thank you. Dr. Ali is an Associate Professor of Sociology at Rutgers University. She's leading an effort to demand the complete withdrawal of the proposed amendment of Law 188. I want you to talk about this. I received a letter from a colleague, a dear colleague, Heather Raffo, actually. I received an open letter that's circulating that is led by you, and I reached out, and I'm so glad that I know you're very busy, and I'm glad that you've made the time. And I know you have very short time for this interview. So I really want to, first of all, I want to ask, what is your background before we get into this? Because I'm curious, are you from Iraq originally?
Yeah, of course. All the signatories are Iraqi women. I mean, that was kind of
because my friend and I, we had a little, because I was telling you I was at the gym with Dunya Mikhail,
right?
And for some reason she thought you were of Lebanese, and I said no, everything she does is about Iraq.
Yes.
So
it's interesting. I do have a French accent, which is not very usual.
That's what threw her off. Okay.
I know it's not very usual. بين العراقيين. No, both my parents arrived in France as refugees in the 80s. So I grew up in France actually, but I lived in Iraq. My mother is from Najaf and my father from Al-Nasriya actually. And I've lived in Iraq many years.
Okay.
And really the idea of this letter actually, if we want to jump right in, is to get more attention from people in the diaspora, because right now the situation is really as bad as can be. So قانون الأحوال الشخصية, the Iraqi Personal Status Code, is, let's say, a regime of law, a set of laws, right? Just to clarify for everybody, that gathers what we consider being most of women's legal rights. So the right to marriage, divorce, inheritance. It is it's a law that is actually outside of the civil code. So it's a specific regime of rights that has been established in Iraq and in other countries around the region. So it has been established in the context of post-colonial state building, right? So in Iraq, it was established in 1959, after decades of debates and negotiation with the different political forces at the time. And there were, of course, people, for example, in the 40s and the 50s, progressive forces, mostly belonging to the anti-imperialist left at the time, that actually advocated for these specific set of rights that are considered personal matters, the rights to marriage, inheritance, child custody, etc., to be actually under the civil code, so that there's a total equality between Iraqi citizens, because it's not something natural. Why should issues of marriage, divorce, inheritance, and child custody be placed under religious laws? It's not something that is obvious, right? It's something that has historically happened. And of course, it also concerns primarily Shia and Muslims. And at the time, it was the revolutionary period. It was, women's movement were extremely strong in Iraq, particularly progressive leftist movement. And we had, for example, somebody who represented part of the women's movement, the Iraqi Women's League, Naziha Delaimi, who actually was a minister at the time of the revolutionary regime of Abdel Karim Qasim. She was a gynecologist as well, and she was the Ministry of Municipalities, and she participated in the drafting of the text of the Personal Status Code and negotiated with the other political forces at the time, including al-ulama al-Sunna wal-Shia, so the Islamic scholars of Sunni and Shi'i madhab or jurisprudence school, to basically have one text that gathers Shia and Sunni Muslims, and that proposes, like set of articles in relation to the right to divorce, to child custody, to inheritance, etc. So it was the first time in 1959 that we had one text that actually applies to all Muslims, Iraqi citizens. What is being proposed right now by some mostly Shia political forces the same political forces that actually came to power in 2003 with the US-led invasion and occupation. And also some religious, religious authorities, also voices coming from Najaf, which is very, very worrying, because other proposals have been made before, but this time it's really coming as much from Najaf that it is coming also from, the political parties in power. The proposal is that, well, we are going to break with this unified, personal status, and we are going to basically insert sectarian codes. And this is not the first time that the proposal has been made. It has been made in 2017. It has been made in 2014. It has been made in 2000. It has been made as soon as the invasion happened, just a few months after the invasion. Abdelaziz al-Hakim, the leader of Al-Majlis al-A'la, one of the main Shia political parties in power since 2003, had actually at the time proposed something called the Decree 137. So we are like at the beginning of the occupation, and one of the first major legal reform that is being proposed by the new political regime in power is to really dismantle this regime of right, to dismantle the legal ground for women's legal rights in Iraq, under the pretense of this idea of like people are free to choose their madhab, their jurisprudence, which is basically a proposal to Lebanize or to sectarianize the personal status code. And at the time, it was contested. Feminists took to the street. Actually, I say that in my book, Women and Gender in Iraq, that follows the feminist movement since 2003, and also the history of women's groups in Iraq since the formation of the state. One of the very first protests organized by women in Iraq were about this topic after the invasion in 2003, to refuse the sectarianization of women's legal rights. And what it means, to be also very concrete for people listening. So just a few years ago, for example, the proposal, so it didn't pass in 2003, didn't pass in 2014, didn't pass in 2017, thanks to women's and also human rights and the civil society. And just generally, Iraqis are all against, all the polls show that actually Iraqis are against such law. It's
men and women.
And women, yeah.
Men and women, yeah.
Absolutely. Actually, the push is really coming from all spheres of the civil society, from regular people as well. Like, why should we have something that actually in the 50s, the personal status code was considered one of the most progressive in the region. We even had, for just 3 years, equality in inheritance in certain type of lands, not fully, but in certain type of land. So that was considered very radical at the time, which shows the political culture of the 50s and the 60s, right? And now we are in a situation where the political culture, what is hegemonic, what is coming from the political regime in power, is extremely misogynistic, it's extremely heteropatriarchal, extremely sectarian, and extremely brutal.
So, Zahra, what's the difference? So this is the first time that I heard that they tried to do this before, in 2003. What this is, I see like this is coming out in a way, and maybe because we didn't have the internet the way we do now. When I was introduced to it, we watched, the Iraqi news regularly. And then I saw this debate and I was really baffled. I thought I'm misunderstanding something because it felt so new that they're trying to do that. It didn't pass the first time they tried to push it through. What is the difference today, over 10 years later, than then? Does it seem like it's about to be approved?
Well, so today, the thing is, I think that the mobilization as well of the civil society of people is also thanks to feminists that have been working in the past 20 years on the issue. So that has been a main point of mobilization for feminist groups in Iraq since 2003. And this is also why I think I'm kind of, I have a mixed feeling in the sense that I see that people have kind of a narrative ready-made against it, which shows the work of feminists on the ground in doing, in awareness raising about the issue. However, on the other side, the political forces have been trying over and over again. And this time, we have a parliament that is extremely weak, structurally weak. We have an interim, I won't get into the debate that led into the the fact that we don't have actually a president of the Iraqi parliament. And of course, as a result of the low turnout during the elections, there's a lot of structural reasons that led to the Iraqi parliament being extremely weak, and the political opposition also being kind of pushed aside, right? So these forces are actually predominant in the Iraqi parliament, and they're also heading some very, very crucial commission, the legal commission. So there are kind of structural elements to it. I was actually listening this morning to the interim president of the Iraqi parliament, who was kind of like talking, really defending the proposal as if, oh no, it's a lie that we want the girls to be married at 9 years old. We're just asking, our demand is 15 years old, like as if it's like the most obvious thing. So when you have a president of a parliament that is fully committed to actually implementing that law, that doesn't see any problem with that law, that has also demonized and I mean the entire political forces and many religious leaders, from voices coming from Najaf again, are demonizing women activists, people who are using this kind of anti-imperialist language, using, oh, you are agent of the West, agent of Zionists, you are this. We are used to this kind of thing in as feminists in Iraq. We are used to this kind of accusation, and that doesn't mean that it works in the street, but however, it does, given also the situation in the region, it does actually have an impact on the debate.
It's like, it seems like it's kind of working. And then, and some people might say, a lot of people don't know, there are differences in the Middle East. There's a difference in the system of Iraq. You're right, like Iraq is more progressive. That's the thing. I know that I was born in 1970, in late 1970 in Iraq. And, the freedoms that we had back then and the pictures that we have differ greatly than the pictures of today.
Absolutely.
So there was a difference, and that wasn't necessarily the case. There was in some other regions, but so some people might feel like, well, they make an assumption that this is already part of the Middle East, which is not part of Iraq.
No.
And also wonder that it almost seems like, this is just their culture and it doesn't matter, but it does matter. I think the thing is, if you can share with us the importance of how will this affect Iraq or the relations, because of the fact that Iraq was and is fairly progressive in comparison to other places.
Yeah.
And, why should people outside of Iraq care about something like this? Of course, as Iraqis, almost all of us, even the ones that were not born of Iraq, if they have parents from Iraq, they have that strong connection, no matter what. But even in general, because I don't see the kind of activity that I see when other things come up, whether it's from the UN. I don't know, maybe, I mean, when I saw your open letter, that's the first like aggressive thing. Sorry, that's my little puppy over here. But I'm trying to keep him quiet. But yeah, share with us, like, why is this important for the world? It's not just for Iraq.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we need also transnational solidarity among feminist movements in the world. I think there are, I mean, even in the US, if you think about it, abortion rights are being lost. I mean, it's like attacks against women and very basic rights for women are all over the world, right? So there are political forces, there's different kind of, let's say, form. They take different forms, but at the same time, I think that women are losing very essential rights and are being attacked by this, heteropatriarchal, misogynist forces all over the world. In Iraq, unfortunately, because of decades of militarization, the reality is that these forces are also extremely, I mean, the Iraqi regime is hyper militarized, right? And so the language that actually these people are using are language of death threat, right? And the threat on activists is very real. It's very, very real in Iraq. It's very easy, actually. Political violence is more a norm than the exception. But to give you one example that I hope will mobilize people and really make them worry so much about very basic legal rights. So, for example, the Ja'fari jurisprudence allows some readings of the Ja'fari, the main Shia jurisprudence in Iraq, some readings of this jurisprudence allows or consider that the age of maturity, sin al-bulugh, is 9 years old. So if actually this law is, or this proposed amendment passes, is voted in the parliament, that means that we are lowering the age of marriage for girls at 9 years old. They also are trying to undermine Article 57 that grants in the Iraqi law, in the current Iraqi law, child custody up to the age of 18 goes to the mother automatically. They are trying to question actually the Article 57. We also know, because of decades of war, because of the sanctions, because of decades of economic and political crisis in Iraq, that actually child marriage is already a widespread reality. So this will actually provide a legal ground for child marriage. Also, it will open the door for example, what we call zawaj al-mut'a, or marriage outside of the court, which is now, it's still illegal in Iraq to get married outside of what we call محكمة الأحوال الشخصية, which is the civil court, right? You have to go through a judge that determines, first of all, that both spouse agree to this, and that actually certain, rights are granted to women getting married. With this, if this proposed amendment passes, marriage outside of the civil court will be allowed. It's already happening anyway, but it will be allowed, and that means that forms of unions that do not grant any rights for women will have actually a legal ground. So this is really an incredible loss. It's also the loss of a legacy, the legacy of women's participating in the negotiations of their right? It's really putting aside the whole legacy of the women's movement in Iraq and bringing us back to a legal reality that dates back to the British monarchy, basically. So we will go back to the time before Iraq was even a republic, like legally speaking. So this is how urgent the situation is.
Zahra, I wrote a book that focuses on the legendary women of ancient Mesopotamia, and where things were a long time ago, where they are. I feel like we're almost like in the twilight zone of this discussion right now.
Absolutely, yeah.
But rather than getting consumed, I guess, by the sadness or the disappointment, what can people do to be a part? You've obviously taken initiative. Thank you very much, and this is very courageous. And although it seems like you said in the letter, this is a duty. It seems like it should be just a basic thing, but not everybody has gotten involved or feel like, or they don't really know what to do. What would you recommend, with you having just like a minute left?
I think we need to raise an awareness on the depth of like the risk that is now on women's rights, that clearly women are at risk of losing very basic rights. And I think we need to raise awareness among the Iraqi community everywhere, among people in general. Also talk about it, with human rights organization, feminist organization. I think we need transnational support. We need as much pressure as possible to make sure that this amendment doesn't pass.
Thank you so much for joining us. So at the Chaldean Cultural Center, it's led by women. Our president is a woman, and our former executive director is a woman, and
Wonderful.
She's still very involved. Our vice chairperson is a woman. So I felt it very at heart that it was part of our duty to invite you here, aside from the fact that the Chaldeans, Iraq is still very dear to us. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for all that you do. And you know what? Best of luck. And we'll do our part. And, thank you for doing yours.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody, for watching, and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Azizi. I really have to run. I'm very sorry.
I know. That's why I'm wrapping it up. I would have kept you here a lot longer. It's okay. Have a wonderful day.
Inshallah, we'll meet in person at some point.
It will happen. Yes, inshallah.